Everybody saw that I was here on time, right? Just checking. It's a Navy thing. Everybody out there, got to keep it strong. It's been a kind of interesting first couple of days back to D.C., so everybody's trying to get their sea legs underneath them and figure out what's going on, so they'll be coming in here in a bit. So I wanted to put that out, but thank you all for coming into the hearing today. General, we're collecting, they're coming. General, you ready?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. The subcommittee will come to order. Today we are taking a closer look at Arlington National Cemetery and the Department of Veterans Affairs National Cemetery Administration. We will examine the Department of the Army's indefinite suspension of military funerals with Caisson support at Arlington. In 2022, Caisson pulling military horses were dying because of the Army's failure to provide them with proper food, veterinary care, stables, and pasture land, which we absolutely will have discussions on. I want to acknowledge the General's willingness to sit down with me, sir. Thank you very much. You've answered quite a few questions that I had, and I look forward to moving into this committee hearing. In May 2023, Army suspended all Caisson platoon operations, yet without any outside equestrian guidance, Army spent millions trying to resume those operations. The Army paid an instructor whose methods caused, from what we understand, more harm than good, resulting in injured horses instead of improvements. And the General, I know that you came in after that was occurred, and you have done amazing things to try to move that forward, so thank you. In December 2023, 7 months after Army suspended Caisson platoon operations, the Army finally sought guidance from outside equestrian experts. Only then did the Army realize that it needed to change course substantially, leading to an indefinite suspension, unfortunately, of military funerals with Caisson support. The Army has given us no estimated time date for when these operations will resume. Right after Veterans Day, it is important for us to remember the families and the service members and veterans who are still waiting for their loved ones to be properly laid to rest in Arlington. And for over 200 years, our country has found a way to give our nation's veterans the proper horse-drawn burial they have earned. It is by far past time for the Army to make a priority of this once again. As a veteran myself who was raised on a horse ranch, this is a primary issue for this committee. The Army must do everything possible to stop wasting our money, taxpayers' money, and resume sustainable Caisson platoon operations to provide our fallen brothers and sisters with military funerals they have earned. I look forward to hearing from Major General Trevor Bredenkamp today about the Army's plans to make things right. We will also hear from Admiral Kreitz about the Army's needs to do to resume sustainable Caisson platoon operations. To ensure that Congress and the American people can get answers from the Army, Admiral Kreitz will testify on our second panel. During our second panel today, we will take a closer look at VA National Cemetery Administration's progress towards its goals of providing 95% of all veterans access to a reasonable burial option within 75 miles of their home. The NCA oversees VA's 155 national cemeteries located in 42 states, including Puerto Rico, and it's in the Veteran Cemetery Grants Program. The NCA awards grants to states, tribes, and territories for its establishment or expansion of state, tribal, and territory veterans cemeteries. NCA generally does a great job of identifying where new cemeteries and expansions of existing cemeteries are most needed, as well as maintaining its national cemeteries. Currently, NCA also does a great job of holding states, tribes, and territories accountable for their operational problems, and grant-funded cemeteries. Our goal today is to discuss where we need to fill gaps to ensure every veterans nationwide has a final resting place. For example, there have been delays and increased costs associated with establishing new VA national cemeteries as part of VA has not adopted cost estimates best practices currently. The VA has not been fully transparent with Congress about their plans for national cemetery expansion projects. Hopefully that will change, many of which cost over $30 million. Grant-funded cemeteries have difficulty meeting performance standards due to inadequate funding and training. I look forward to today's discussions with our second panel of witnesses and how VA can best serve our nation's veterans and their families. Both Army and VA have a sacred duty to enshrine fallen service members and veterans. I look forward to discussing how each agency can better fulfill their duty. With that, I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Chairman Luttrell. We talk a great deal in this committee about America's obligation to our service members, veterans, and their families, and justifiably so. And I sincerely believe we all share a common goal to ensure the best care, benefits, and services go to our veterans, and the best that we can muster for them as a nation. They deserve nothing less. It's just as important to recognize that our obligation to our nation's service members and veterans doesn't end when they pass away. We must commit ourselves with the same earnestness to providing service when it comes time to lay them to rest. Thankfully, VA's National Cemetery Administration is one of the good news stories in our federal government. By and large, they are doing a good job of serving the families and loved ones at a time of high emotional stress. And they're very good at interacting with our state, tribal, and local governments while supporting them to do the same. And I have yet to meet an NCA employee from groundskeepers up to management who isn't fully committed to that mission. Of course, no program is without fault or room for improvement. So hopefully today we can delve into the nuance of NCA's work and figure out what is going well and what we can tweak to make it even better. Also at issue today is the ongoing reset of the Army's Caisson platoon at Arlington Cemetery. After decades of neglect, the platoon was taken out of commission, rightly so, I may add, so that the health of the animals that provide funerary services can be ensured in both the short term and the long term. That doesn't come without consequence, and families who have delayed interring their loved ones while the Army reconstitutes this unit deserve to know that the Army is working diligently to return the Caisson platoon to its proper stature. I hope that Major General Bredenkamp can shed some light on the Army's progress and any potential pitfalls that may delay a return to normal operation. Our nation's veterans' cemeteries are the most visible reminder of the service and sacrifice of our military communities, and they serve a vital role in connecting the public with our veterans' legacy. So whatever we can do to make sure they operate efficiently, we must. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for holding this hearing. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. The witness on our first panel is Major General Trevor Bredenkamp, Commanding General Joint Task Force National Capital Region, U.S. Army Military District of Washington. General Bredenkamp, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir. Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. General Bredenkamp, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the Department of the Army.
Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the men and women of the United States Army on a matter that holds special significance for me, our service members, families, veterans, and our nation. That is, ensuring those who have served our nation are laid to rest with dignity and honor. Since 1948, the Caisson platoon of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, has carried deceased service members to their final resting place on the hallowed grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. The horse-drawn Caisson funeral procession, a symbol of our nation's respect and gratitude, is one of the most recognized traditions in our military. Acknowledging the profound importance of the Caisson, the United States Army is unwavering in its commitment to continuing this solemn duty for those eligible and rendering honors to those who have served our nation. We want to ensure that once Caisson operations resume, eligible families can be assured we will never again have to cease Caisson support. The challenges facing our program did not manifest themselves in just the last couple of years. They evolved over a long period of time due to deteriorating facilities, reduced pasture and turnout, resource constraints, and the atrophying of basic equine skills once resident in a larger portion of our Army. Essentially, we have had to completely restart our program. Therefore, the Army is taking a conditions-based approach to the resumption of Caisson services. The Army's plan to return operations includes several key milestones that will set the conditions for continuous operations without future disruption. The milestones associated with this plan are focused on 5 key areas: facility renovation and land acquisition, horse procurement, horse health and fitness, horse and soldier training and assessment, and talent management. In my written statement submitted for this hearing, I have provided additional details for each. We have worked closely with recognized experts from the U.S. Equestrian Federation and the larger equine community to inform the development of our plan. We continue to leverage their expertise as we make incremental progress towards resuming Caisson operations within Arlington National Cemetery. As the commander of the Military District of Washington, I am responsible for providing capability to support a state funeral, as well as to support each of the military service memorial affairs missions in Arlington National Cemetery. But we do prepare for this mission with a wide network. We work closely with Arlington National Cemetery to understand trends for the number of Caisson-supported funerals per day, which informs our planning and resourcing requirements. Our highly qualified experts help to connect us to the larger equine enterprise and ensure our efforts are underpinned by U.S. equestrian standards. We also work through the Army Secretariat and staff to inform updated policy and regulations for the larger military working equine enterprise. Senior Army leaders receive routine updates and remain involved in our efforts while ensuring resourcing and support is provided without delay. I mentioned earlier this matter holds deep significance for me personally and has informed my decisions and recommendations related to the Caisson mission. Both my wife and I come from military families, and we both serve in the Army. My parents are buried at Arlington National Cemetery, and my father's funeral was 3 months ago. He was eligible for Caisson conveyance, but we elected to proceed with the service despite the Caisson being unavailable, knowing his funeral would be conducted with dignity and include full military honors. The Army remains committed to resuming full and sustainable Caisson operations at Arlington National Cemetery. While progress continues across our 5 key areas, much work remains. We must ensure Caisson conveyance resumes in a way that maintains the dignity and solemnity of the service while prioritizing the well-being of our horses and our soldiers. We owe this to the American people and the horses entrusted to our care. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the men and women of the United States Army and for your generous and unwavering support for our outstanding soldiers, veterans, and their families. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. The statement of General Bredenkamp will be entered into the record. We will now move to questioning, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. General, so per our conversation that we had before the committee hearing started, and I do realize that you brought into the situation that had been developing over multiple decades. I would like to know exactly where we are now and where, because in my mind, our Caisson platoon should be the most elite organization on the planet. I think our service members are owed that. This football has been handed to you, and of course you're running it down the field. And now in military services is timed, and I know that eventually you will have to hand this off to someone else. But I want to hear how we are doing and when we can expect the Caisson platoon to be reactivated for military services.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. So we are on a good glide path to resuming operations. As I mentioned, the 5 key milestones that we are following to restart our program. The first one is facilities and land acquisition. So we have to renovate the 1906 historic stables on Fort Myer, and we have to procure adequate land and facilities to turn out the horses. Previously, we only had about 6 acres that belonged to the Army. We are in the process of acquiring up to 150 acres to support the Caisson platoon mission in the
Time frame on when that acquisition will be complete?
We are in about the 90% stage right now. It's working through its final clearance process, and we could potentially look at pending approval in some language in the National Defense Authorization Act by next spring.
So that language revolves around the NDA being passed?
Yes, Congressman.
Great, duly noted.
And Congressman, the next part is horse procurement. So we talked briefly about some of the challenges we had in terms of having to rehabilitate horses. We have retired about 40 horses, but we have procured and now have 2 fully trained and certified squads within our formation. Over the last 6 weeks, we procured an additional 8 horses. Once we fill that up to 11, they will begin their training. And so by March or April of next year, we could have up to 3 trained and certified squads. We have to procure our 4th, and the min standard that we've established within the Army is once we achieve 4 squads of fully certified horses, that is when we look to restart Caisson operations in Arlington National Cemetery.
We had discussed at a possible MOS in the Army being adopted or being created for the Caisson platoon, much like the soldiers for the unknown soldiers. I'm sorry, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. Can you give me a left or right flank on the best course of action? Right now, because we're using contracted agents, correct?
For some of the requirements, yes, Congressman.
And I know that knowledge base that was created over the decades and decades and decades is no longer with us, hence the dive in what the Caisson platoon, how that went away. How are we structured to recreate that knowledge base?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. The first thing we've done is we've brought on board some highly qualified experts to advise us on the requisite skill sets. So, we have a highly qualified expert at my level. He's the U.S. Equestrian Federation Chief of Sport. We also have one at the Old Guard level who is a U.S.-renowned horse hitch driving trainer who's been doing this for decades. One of the challenges we faced is we had previously recruited soldiers for the Caisson platoon only out of the Old Guard, so that's about 1,500 soldiers availability. They did not all have horse experience, so we had to bring them on and teach them basic horsemanship skills. We have expanded that recruiting pool to the entire Army through working with the Department of the Army and the recruiting and retention apparatus. We are also trying to identify through talent management people who grew up with horse skills. We've actually brought a couple of officers on recently that have grew up with horse skills and did helped to run horse programs before they commissioned into the Army. What we are also doing is looking at ways we can keep people in the formation longer. So you mentioned the MOS. So we are looking at the potential for creating an MOS that may allow soldiers to stay in the Caisson formation longer. Challenges associated with that are, what is their career progression timeline? What is their professional development schedule? We've done this with other formations. The U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone, who also falls under my purview, has that set up. So we are looking at ways we could potentially have an MOS that has an additional skill identifier that allows them to stabilize for longer than just a 2 or 3 year assignment. The other part is we're looking at the medical community. We've been working with the the veterinary and service organizations to identify enough large equine vets to adequately support the Caisson mission.
Thank you, General. I yield to Ranking Member Pappas.
Thank you. Thank you, General, for your comments. And I appreciate that this is forward-looking about where we need to go, but I think we also need to reckon with where we've been. And in your written testimony, you say that previous practices and resourcing were inadequate, resulting in conditions counter to sustaining a healthy herd of horses. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on what went wrong and why the Army failed to prioritize and resource the Caisson platoon adequately.
Yes, thank you, Ranking Member. The last time the Army expanded this program was in 1985. That's when we acquired the facility on Fort Belvoir, Virginia, that had 10 acres, which included 6 acres of turnout. In 2017, the Old Guard sought to further expand that capability, but it just didn't it didn't rise to the level of support for resources, for funding. So that fell back on the table. The other challenge we have faced is the skill, as I mentioned in my oral statement, is the skill sets, equine skills have atrophied within not only the Army, but also within the nation. And so having the appropriate skills within the formation to properly care for the horses was not there. It wasn't that horses were being mistreated like purposely, it was because people were just not educated in the right way in order to take care of horses the way they should be. So now we currently have a contracted facility with 17 horse care professionals that provide daily care and conditioning and nutrition support for our growing herd. So that's one of the main challenges that we faced, Congressman. The other part is just, I think over time, decisions are made on priorities and resources that took away from the Caisson mission.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for outlining the 5 milestones and giving us a progress update on where we stand with those. And I think the focus should be on sustainability and how we achieve that over time. On that front, it's possible that you could use some of the current herd to perform funerals for families that are waiting, but there's an opportunity cost for that. I'm wondering if you can speak to both the short-term and long-term issues with that and the need to focus on sustainability over time.
Yes, thanks, Ranking Member. So our first priority is to ensure that we have a Caisson squad capable of conducting a state funeral. That is our main requirement upon the death of a U.S. president, if requested by the family, to provide that support. To restart operations at Arlington National Cemetery, we want to ensure that we have the requisite capability to ensure that it never stops again. So what we've learned is to have the appropriate work-rest cycle, we need to have a squad working and a squad resting. With only 2 squads, that leaves us little to no room for error if there's injuries or if a squad is called away to do a state funeral. So as we continue to build that capacity, we grow from 2 squads, 3 squads, 4 squads, we grow our ability and decrease our risk to perform those ceremonial support within Arlington National Cemetery. And so again, one thing we learned is we were working horses too hard. It caused chronic injury, which required us to put horses in rehabilitation, and we are changing our program so we don't, again, have to face that consideration.
Thanks. The platoon that serves Arlington isn't the Army's sole Caisson platoon, of course. Fort Sam Houston plays a similar role in honoring our service members, veterans, and families. The question is, has that unit suffered from the same lack of prioritization by the Army? And are there any best practices that could be carried over from that unit and applied to the situation at Arlington?
So in April of 22, when we had the 2 horses euthanized at the Old Guard, the Army undertook a holistic review of all the horse programs across the Army. The Fort Sam Houston program that you mentioned, it's different in scope and scale. They have about a 10-horse herd, where our horse herd was about 65. Each of the other programs around the nation performs a varied degree of missions, manually outreach or reenactment. But I would tell you the Army, under the direction of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower Reserve Affairs, has what's called the Task Force Military Working EQUID. And what we are doing within the Caisson platoon is informing the updated policy and regulation to make sure that we don't have these challenges at any of the other programs.
Thank you, General. I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Subcommittee, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And obviously for having this hearing and today to oversee the Department of the Army and the Veteran Affairs Cemeteries. Now, it's through our oversight over these agencies that we better honor those who fought and died for this country. It's our responsibility to ensure that grieving families can lay their veteran and service member loved ones to rest with dignity. With more than 70,000 veterans in my district, including many military retirees, my office receives numerous inquiries regarding the memorial service available to them, including those who served on active duty in the National Guard as well, and in the reserves. So to ensure my constituents are best served, I take my responsibility as a member of this authorizing committee and also the Appropriations Committee very seriously. And today I continue my work to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being responsibly spent on memorials that my constituents have earned. General, thank you for being here, and thank you for answering our questions today. For years, the Army was unable to properly maintain the Caisson platoon at Arlington. You've talked about that a couple times in your time here with us. Millions of dollars were spent on misguided contracts, including a trainer who injured horses and on horses that did not meet mission requirements. How many more tax dollars does the Army need from Congress to get the platoon up and running again?
Congressman, our requirements are contained within the current president's budget that's under consideration, and if passed, we'll ensure that we have all the resources we need to continue to move this program forward.
Well, yeah, but let's talk dollars here. I'm an appropriator as well, so this is an important conversation for me. How many more horses do we need per squad, and what is the cost estimated per squad?
So the cost estimated to procure a squad of horses, and that's from just the horses themselves and all the associated training, is about $900,000.
Per squad?
Per squad.
And how many squads?
So we currently have 2 that are fully trained and certified. We've procured 8 of the 11 of the 3rd squad, and we will begin procuring for the 4th squad shortly.
Thank you. And just one more question on this. Not only do we obviously want to ensure the well-being of the squad in terms of the operation as well, but we want to ensure, that you provide for the well-being and health of these horses as well. What changes is Army implementing to ensure that it purchases mission-ready horses and takes proper care of them? You mentioned just a little bit ago about ensuring that those that grew up with horses, that have that history with them, takes care of them. But obviously, this was a concern that we saw before. We don't want to see horses getting injured or mistreated in this process. So, what are the specific proper steps that the Army is taking on this?
Congressman, in terms of horse procurement, we've brought into our organization a highly qualified expert, a gentleman named Jim Westbrook, who's been doing horse hitch driving and training for more than 4 decades. He along with his network of horse providers, has allowed us to gain a greater network of existing locations to procure horses. I mentioned we just procured 8 horses. That's based on his connections within the horse hitch driving community. We're looking for a specific breed and temperament. And so, previously we had either been gifted horses, or we had paid we had procured horses for a lower dollar figure who may not have been up to the task. The reality was we were putting those horses on the mission regardless. Now we are looking to procure the appropriate horses with the right temperament who can be on a horse hitch team and perform the duty the way it ought to be performed.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Last question that kind of ties back to the last one that I had. If before the horses were acquired the way you're describing, and now it's more intentional effort, it sounds like, does that increase the cost per squad from $900,000 to more, or is that accounting for the new way of acquiring and training these horses?
Congressman, that number is informed by all of our newly implemented procedures.
Okay, thank you, sir. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McGarvey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Major General Bredenkamp, I want to thank you and your team for the service that you provide to these families, to these veterans, to these soldiers, and what it means to them. I want to just think back a little bit. America is founded on the idea and the ideal that all people are created equal. And we've had our stumbles in reaching that vision, but it is one that we continue to strive for together. When we're here talking about this in sort of the abstract, I want to put a picture to it. And one of the most evocative images, I think, in terms of this type of procession is when President Kennedy was assassinated. And you saw the image of the First Lady and his son saluting him as the casket is pulled by the horse-drawn Caisson. And what that meant, the dignity of that moment, the power of that moment. And of course, what I want to make sure is that a kid from Kentucky who either is killed in active duty or passes away is offered the same dignity that a president of the United States from a wealthy Massachusetts family is offered. So I support your efforts to reinstate the horse-drawn Caisson services as soon as possible, while also ensuring that these horses are treated correctly, humanely, appropriately. I am a Kentucky kid, so you don't have to tell me about the importance of horses to economy, to society, and what they deserve. You mentioned that the Army is searching for a permanent facility for the Caisson platoon. Can you provide us with an update on the progress of this search, including any challenges that you've encountered, potential locations identified, any projected timelines you have as well for establishing this facility?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. So we are actually proceeding fairly quickly through the major land acquisition process. We began in earnest in May with the Corps of Engineers Real Estate Property Division, which procures land for the Department of the Army. We sought sources, in the Virginia area. We got over 100 responses. We necked that down to about 5. We went out and conducted on-site reconnaissance, not only with our personnel, but also with our highly qualified experts from the U.S. Equestrian Federation. And we identified and recommended a single property that would meet and fulfill our requirements. That process is going through a final real estate appraisal and review process, which is part of the Corps of Engineers Real Estate Property Board. And then it will go through the Army and likely to the Department of Defense for final concurrence.
Thank you, and I appreciate that update. And as I understand it, the Army will use temporary stabling options while it renovates the facilities and does those sorts of things. How long can the temporary stables be used, and why isn't that sufficient to fulfill the stabling milestone?
Congressman, the temporary stabling option that we are looking at was advised to us by, again, our highly qualified expert. It can be used for quite a while, assuming appropriate maintenance from the contractor. It is a contracted solution, and cost would increase over time the longer you keep it in place. And so, we're using contracts as a bridging solution to get to the end state. And so, a permanent horse care and equine facility that supports more than 100 acres of turnout space is what we're looking for. And then renovating the existing stables on Fort Myer, the 1906 historic stables, is the other piece of that would allow us to house this or stable the horses on Fort Myer when they're conducting missions at Arlington, and then they go out to that 100-acre property for rest and relaxation, if you will.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And again, we recognize the importance of the humane treatment of the animals and the dignity of the service. Again, for our troops, for our military families, any working class kid who goes into the service, puts on a uniform, willing to sacrifice everything for us, they deserve the dignity that anyone else in any other position would receive. Thank you.
Commissioner McGarvey? There's always an ongoing competition who is the better horseman, Kentucky folks or Texas folks. It's just a battle. General, thank you for your testimony today. This is very important to us, and I think collectively, as you heard on the panel today, we are giving you what you need if you ask, and go forward and do great things. Because as Mr. McGarvey said, our veterans deserve the absolute best, and this is something that should not have gone away. And the problem exists, I understand, but sir, you have been tasked with fixing that issue. So Godspeed and good luck. And this concludes our first panel. And General, you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member.
You guys ready? You look ready. Welcome and thank you. You guys ready? Okay. As I noted before, our second panel includes Admiral John Kreitz, correct? All right, outstanding. An equestrian expert who is testifying in his personal capacity about Army's efforts to resume Caisson platoon operations at Arlington National Cemetery. Our second panel will also focus on the Department of Veterans Affairs. Our lead witness from the VA is Mr. Ronald E. Walters. Acting Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs, National Cemetery Administration, Mr. Walters is joined by Mr. Richard Chandler, Deputy Undersecretary for Management, National Cemetery Administrations, and Mr. Robert Orifice. I get it? God, man, last time too, I'm sorry. I mean, I tried. I practiced all night last night trying to get this right. Say it one more time. Orifice, okay. Executive Director for Benefits and Memorial Systems, Office of Information and Technology. Panel 2 also includes Ms. Leslie Witter, Senior Vice President for Advocacy, National Funeral Directors, and I will yield to the ranking member for the final introduction.
Well, it's my pleasure, Mr. Chairman, to introduce Mr. Sean Buck, who's the director of the New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery in Boscawen, New Hampshire. He's had that role since 2018. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army in May 1987. He's airborne, air assault, and ranger qualified and retired from active duty in July 2008. He received a bachelor's degree in economics from the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, New York, master's degree from Northwestern. He and his wife live in Bow, New Hampshire. They have 3 grown children, and he's demonstrated a tremendous leadership ability overseeing operations at our state veterans cemetery. And from the staff, the volunteers, the larger veteran community, he's brought everyone together with a singular purpose of honoring New Hampshire's veterans and their families and maintaining the hallowed ground that is the New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery. So welcome, Mr. Buck.
Mr. Army Ranger, huh? You know, team guys with Army Rangers, just like this thing. Welcome to the panel, sir, and thank you for your service. I please ask the witnesses on our second panel to stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Please be seated. Admiral Kreitz, you are now recognized for 5 minutes, sir, to deliver your opening statement.
Of the committee, I'm honored to be with you today. I join you today as an equestrian advisor, having begun riding at the age of 6, having horses in my life since then, currently living on a Virginia horse farm, sharing 7 horses with my incredible wife of 36 years. My equestrian path was somewhat unusual in that I initially left horses at home at the age of 18 to enlist in the U.S. Navy, serving as a machinist mate on USS Nassau, LHA-4, before 2 chief petty officers pushed me down the path to be an officer. I ultimately retired from the Navy after over 37 years in uniform, being blessed to lead thousands of amazing men and women afloat and ashore. And during my wife's and my Navy journey, we moved back and forth across the country, pulling a horse trailer, living in and participating in equestrian activities in 8 states, ultimately settling here in Virginia. Beyond owning and riding and loving horses for nearly 55 years, I have served on the board of the United States Equestrian Federation, the national governing body for equestrian sport, for the past 4 years and continue to serve today. And I also am a Federation Equestrian International, FEI, a licensed dressage steward, and a licensed U.S. Equestrian Federation dressage technical delegate, officiating at competitions both nationally and internationally, by way of showing I'm very much involved in the horse world. I first became involved with assisting the Old Guard's Caisson platoon in July 2023, after learning of the extent of the horse welfare, personnel, training, and equipment issues facing the unit. I reached out to Major General Bredenkamp offering my support, which he enthusiastically accepted. Along with Lieutenant Colonel Art Parrott, U.S. Army retired, a former Old Guard Army Honor Company commander, a longtime horseman and former FEI official, we arranged for a group of top American and British equestrian experts to advise the Army, which that group that met in December of last year. That group has continued to offer advisory assistance, as have I and Colonel Parrott, when requested by the Military District of Washington. So why did our Army get to this point where it has been unable to execute the Caisson mission for nearly 2 years? Historically, the military took care of their horses as they did any other soldier, because to do so otherwise invites failure on the battlefield. Today's military takes care of its canine, carrier pigeon, and dolphin soldiers, but over the past 25 plus years has lost the intrinsic knowledge of how to care for the equine soldier, as was discussed a lot at depth in the first panel. The quality of life of an Army horse should not be less than that of the soldier, for the horse is also a member of our National Defense Force. Deliberate abuse can never be tolerated, and I am very much encouraged by all the conversation in the first panel that that is definitely a priority today. Any periodic evaluation of its objectives, though, of the Caisson platoon's objectives over the past 25 years would have revealed a high rate of injury, abnormal dependency on veterinary intervention, and delayed retirement. At a minimum, the first metric observed by the Army should have been do no harm with all its implied actions and performance evaluations. The goal should be to treat the horse as a soldier who is prepared through proper support to execute their mission, which primarily is a 6-horse team pulling a caisson without cannon or ammunition over a well-maintained road surface at a solemn walking pace. And I think that the key skill set that led to that deterioration all comes down to the manning in the unit and the expertise that was allowed to atrophy over all the years. Prior to 1959-1974, the Army had a leader such as CW4 John McKinney, who led the unit during that entire time and was an equestrian expert. He is the last commissioned officer to serve for a long term in the unit as an equestrian expert. In fact, the historical barn is named in his honor, dedicated in his honor. So that we have had a spreading ignorance of horses by unit leadership ever since, and that is what needs to be solved. The Army is working to do that. From my first meeting with General Bredenkamp, he understood that it was apparent that the culture needed to change, they needed to develop expertise. But I think that that could be done faster, and I'd like to address some questions on that from you all later. But the key things that have to be accomplished that haven't been over the last couple of years is getting the doctrine in place, fixing the manpower and the structure, which hasn't happened, frankly, fast enough. It has taken an inordinate amount of time to implement a synchronized comprehensive training program. Likewise, there have been numerous unnecessary equipment purchases, poor civilian personnel selections, and costly contracts, which you all have discussed earlier. I believe the Army sincerely desires to fix most of the issues now facing the program, but it will not succeed without a core group of permanently assigned military officer equestrian experts, like CW4 John McKinney, implementation of an effective Army equestrian program doctrine and policies, an operational synchronized training program, permanent civilian direct hiring authority, and more effective contracting processes. Without these, I'm concerned that the fate of the program may only survive perhaps 1 or 2 cycles of leadership and collapse again to the detriment of the horses and the military ceremonial mission. To avoid a continuation of the path which has resulted in the enormous amounts of tax dollars being spent and the long-term denial of earned honors, the Secretary of the Army would be well advised to develop a plan based on existing historical documents, tempered with modern innovations and current safety concerns for both horse and soldier, to accomplish and sustain long-term within a reasonable budget the stated mission with a military staff. This plan needs civilian staffing on a temporary basis to establish an education baseline, horse and rider training programs, stable facilities, horse procurement, and equipment selection, but should transition quickly to a military program with the appropriate position staffing and training and with limited civilian support. And the Army is going to need additional authority to do that quickly and more effectively. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before the committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. The representative Admiral Kreitz will be entered into the record. Mr. Walters, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Good morning, Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs National Cemetery Administration. Accompanying me today are Richard Chandler, NCA's Deputy Undersecretary for Management, and Robert Orifici, Executive Director for Benefits and Memorial Services, Office of Information Technology. Throughout the 118th session, we appreciate the interest and engagements we've had with your staff and the committee's commitment to our nation's veterans. NCA memorializes our nation's heroes and provides perpetual care for more than 5 million grave sites. We maintain 155 national cemeteries as national shrines. Nearly 4.1 million veterans from the Revolutionary War to the present are interred in national cemeteries. There are 5.4 million veterans and their family members buried in our hallowed grounds. Last year, we interred more than 134,000 veterans and eligible family members. Families who interred their loved ones last year reported 99% satisfaction with the appearance of the cemeteries and 97% satisfaction with the quality of service provided by cemetery personnel. Additionally, NCA provided more than 325,000 headstones and markers and prepared more than 625,000 presidential memorial certificates. Each day, the men and women of NCA strive to fulfill our mission, and their efforts continue to be extraordinary. But perhaps even more poignant, the men and women of the National Cemetery Administration give direct support to grieving families in their most difficult times, with the unwavering promise to care for their deceased loved ones in perpetuity. At the committee's request, today's hearing focuses on providing a dignified burial option to 95% of veterans within 75 miles of where they live in the United States, establishing and expanding national cemeteries, highlighting our Veteran Cemetery Grants Program, and sharing our ongoing efforts to modernize our technology. In expanding or establishing national cemeteries, we follow established processes. For example, we routinely analyze interment data and veteran population trends in advance of depletion to identify when to expand cemeteries. Just this past weekend, we dedicated a new urban cemetery, St. Albans National Cemetery in Queens, New York, and 2 new rural national cemeteries are projected to open over the next 2 years. In fiscal year 24, we added over 180,500 interment sites alone, which means that more veterans and their families can continue to be served in their local communities. However, we cannot meet our 95% goal alone. We also rely on our strong partnership and collaboration with states, territories, and tribal organizations through the Veteran Cemetery Grant Program. There are currently 122 grant-funded cemeteries where 42,720 veterans and family members were interred last year. Over $1 billion has been awarded since the program's inception in 1978 to establish or expand or improve these cemeteries. Finally, we continue to modernize NCA's information technology systems. NCA has leveraged digital data to automate pre-need eligibility determinations by eliminating queuing for cases that meet certain criteria. We will automate the application process for presidential memorial certificates and will eventually expand to automate other benefit applications, such as headstones and markers, using this technology. Technological innovations also improve how we memorialize 10 million veterans through our online Veterans Legacy Memorial. We expanded this platform last year to many private cemeteries and DoD cemeteries, including portions of Arlington National Cemetery. We are also exploring ways to involve living veterans in preserving their own legacies by sharing photos, stories, and other mementos with us before they pass away. In conclusion, thanks to your support, we will be able to provide more care and more benefits to more veterans this year than ever before. Your commitment to NCA reflects your understanding of our enduring mission. Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me to speak with the committee today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. The written statement of Mr. Walters will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Witter, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the National Funeral Directors Association. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the members of the National Funeral Directors Association. I'm Leslie Witter, NFDA's Senior Vice President of Advocacy. So while the DoD and the VA are responsible for providing funeral and burial benefits, as well as ensuring proper military honors, it is funeral directors who assist families in organizing personalized services to both celebrate the life of their loved one and honor their service to our country. Funeral directors coordinate with the VA and DoD to schedule funeral and burial services, to educate and assist families in filing benefit claims, to ensure veterans receive the proper grave markers, and collaborate with the DoD and the VSOs to provide appropriate military honors. I would like to acknowledge the strong partnership NFDA has with the VA and the DoD. Together, we are committed to supporting our fallen service members and their families. In preparation for my testimony today, NFDA conducted a funeral service survey to gather insights into how we can all better serve veterans and their families. I'm pleased to share the thoughtful and detailed responses in my written testimony. However, I will now highlight some of the key findings from our survey. Approximately 3/4 of respondents do live within 75 miles of a VA National Cemetery, state or tribal veteran cemetery. Overall, survey respondents expressed positive feedback regarding the condition, upkeep, and care of VA cemeteries, as well as the professionalism of VA cemetery staff. While the NFDA and VA collaborate closely to educate funeral directors about funeral and burial benefits, our survey indicates a discrepancy between knowledge of government resources and ease of use, with only 11.6% of respondents finding it easy to find the information on the VA or NCA website. So NFDA urges the VA to enhance its educational outreach to veterans and their families well in advance of any immediate need, ensuring that information is proactively shared and that expectations are clearly communicated and fully understood from the beginning. Funeral directors who assist families in filling benefit claims are the ones who see firsthand the real-world impact of the VA's educational efforts. Our survey highlighted confusion among veteran families about what funeral and burial benefits they're entitled to and what is covered by the VA. Among those who experienced challenges, several recurring themes emerged, particularly a lack of education and understanding among veteran families regarding the benefits they're entitled to. And while NFDA is encouraged that less than 25% of families have problems assessing benefits, it's funeral directors who spend a great deal of time working with families to help them through a tiresome and burdensome process. NFDA would like to see the VA improve the speed and ease of receiving funeral and burial benefits. Another recurrent issue that emerged was difficulty in obtaining complete and accurate records, such as missing or incomplete DD-214s. We believe DoD is working to create a fully electronic DD-214, which would be a significant step forward in accelerating the processing of veteran claims and also alleviating the burden on funeral directors who are often forced to chase down this missing information. Another area where funeral directors have experienced significant problems is when working with families impacted by delays when trying to schedule burials at Arlington National Cemetery. Almost half of respondents have arranged a funeral at Arlington in the past 5 years, but of those, only 1/3 of respondents said it was either very easy or easy to schedule the services. NFDA encourages the DoD to review and refine its processes for scheduling burials at Arlington National Cemetery and urges Arlington to collaborate closely with funeral directors to work together to address the challenges faced by both funeral professionals and grieving families. In closing, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to testify before you today on behalf of Funeral Service and NFDA. I hope my testimony provided valuable insights, and I'm happy to address any questions you may have. Thank you.
The written statement of Ms. Witter will be entered into the hearing record. My apologies once again. Mr. Buck, sir, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery.
Thank you very much, sir. Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, really grateful for you having me here today. Mainly, I want to brag a little bit about the staff at our State Veterans Cemetery. They're dedicated servants and employees. Some are veterans, both past and present. They're the backbone of the New Hampshire State Veterans Cemetery, and they do a great job of honoring our veterans and our community. We conduct just under 1,150 burials a year, and they do every single one of them, as well as all the groundskeeping and everything. I only have a staff of 5 full-time maintenance folks, and they are really, truly amazing folks. I also want to acknowledge the Veterans Cemetery Association. It's a group of, not all veterans, but folks that just are interested in the cemetery. They're volunteers, and honestly, volunteers, if the staff's the backbone, volunteers are the lifeblood. We have volunteers that come all the time. In fact, we had 100 of them at the Veterans Cemetery yesterday, taking flags away from graves. The Veterans Cemetery Association raises funds. They've built a learning center to educate the community about the contributions of New Hampshire State veterans. And they've also built a memorial walkway, which in my estimation is second to none. It's just a true tribute, over 100 benches and monuments that wander through the woods of New Hampshire. It's awesome. I want to acknowledge the Veterans Cemetery Grants Program, an excellent state-federal partnership. They communicate with us well. In fact, we're currently undergoing a $5.3 million expansion, which is going to add 10 years of cremation burials, both in-ground and columbarium. The breaking of the ground will start this month, and they communicate with us well. They're pretty easy to work with, and they have quarterly updates for all state and tribal veteran cemeteries, and I want to give them a shout out. They really do a great job. I want to also comment about the Burial Equity for Guards and Reserves Act. The New Hampshire State Veteran Cemetery is one of the first states to implement the Burial Equity Act, thanks to the great work of our legislative members as well as others. Since June 1st, 2022, we've conducted 97 burial equity interments, of which 16 of them are dependents. It's been a very important program in the state of New Hampshire because in New Hampshire, we don't have a tremendous active duty presence. So most of the time you see somebody in uniform, it's a member of the Guard or the Reserve component. And I think it's important that we honor those folks that serve our country and our communities as well. The one thing I do want to highlight is from time to time, military honors is difficult. Generally, only 2 service members are sent to the Veterans Cemetery from the branch of service. There have been times in the past couple of years where a branch is only able to send 1 service member. Fortunately, we've been able to supplement because we have a retiree named Master Sergeant Lee Hurdle, who's a bugler, who's played taps at over 7,000 military services, and he will often step in and help with the flagfold if the service is not able to send 2 requisite folks. There has been some reductions in, particularly the Air Force reduced their staffing. The Air Force is normally, the honors is done by the Air National Guard, and they're excellent. They do a fantastic job, but their numbers have dwindled recently. And so it's a tougher challenge for them to cover every funeral in New Hampshire as well as Western Maine and some in Vermont. So they're tested. And in my estimation, this is the least we can do for our veterans is have 2 well-trained uniformed service members to conduct military honors and present a flag to the family. And the other thing that I think about when we're conducting honors is that's a new opportunity that we're going to see a community member, it's their first time seeing a military service. It's a young person's first time being exposed to the military. And so I think the importance of this military flagfold and presentation and the playing of taps is critical to both recruiting, retention, and the civil military relations at the Veterans Cemetery. So that's the one issue that I would bring up. I think that in general, the branches are dedicated, but I do know that they also have a lot on their plate and they have a lot of taskings and things like that. And so from time to time, I'm not sure it's their top priority, and I'm not sure it's able to be their top priority. So that's the one thing I wanted to bring up in front of this committee, because I do think that ensuring that 2 well-trained military members present the flag, play taps, and give these veterans the exact honors that they've earned and that they deserve. And with that, I'm open to any questions that you may have, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to testify before this committee.
Thank you, sir. The written statement from Mr. Buck will be entered into the hearing record. We'll now move to questioning. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Walters, when we do an expansion for VA National Cemeteries, because I'm unaware that we were doing any expansions, and just giving kind of the dollar signs on what that looks like for expansion, is that something that you passed up through the Secretary, and the Secretary should be informing Congress, or is that something that you inform Congress directly of cemetery expansions, which I understand we need them, but information flow is very important because taxpayers are going to pay for that. And so my question is, because I was unaware, how does that information flow happen?
Well, sir, thank you for the question. Of course, if the expansion involves a major construction project, it would be part of our budget request, and there would be a prospectus in the budget that would outline cost and scope of the expansion.
So those three cemeteries, I'm assuming now, that was in, again, I may have missed it, which I'm going to go back in and double check.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not sure which three you're...
I'm sorry, I must have missed when we were doing the markup and the budget line came out for the next fiscal year. Was the dollar sign for the new cemeteries involved in that budget line?
No, sir, there was not any funding included in the fiscal year 25 budget request for new cemeteries. We have...
One of those, I thought you said there's two new cemeteries that are going to be activated.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I'll clarify. We have 2 additional rural cemeteries that will be opening in fiscal year 26. They are currently under construction.
Where'd that money come from?
They are both major construction projects, so they were included in the budget.
So they were on the budget line.
Oh, I'm sorry, they were minor construction projects. So they...
I tell you what, catch me after class. We need to chat.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, you bet. Mr. Orifice, I'm going to go on what Ms. Witter said about recognition. There was an issue with our service member, our veteran community, having issues navigating the VA's website for burial process. Did I say that right, Ms. Witter? Is that landed in your court, sir?
So VA OIT is responsible for va.gov and our webpage, but we work hand in hand with NCA to collaborate on the content. And
So who do I need to be talking to clarify that issue that she just brought
Chandler,
up?
probably.
Sir?
Mr. Chandler.
How you doing, sir?
Mr. Chairman, yes, this issue was raised the other day in talking to the committee where a veteran's family put in their address and we're looking for the nearest closest cemetery to bury their veteran. Unfortunately, the list populates all of the state and national cemeteries by closest distance, not necessarily clarifying whether that cemetery is actually open for burials.
Okay, that sounds like a ones and zeros problem, right?
So we're working with OINT. So Mr. Orifice and I have spoken about how we can make that clearer on our website so that veterans, families, and funeral homes would be able to understand what cemeteries are actually open for burials, either casketed or cremation.
Okay, great. What's the time frame on that? Because this is a problem that we should not have.
Absolutely. I don't have an exact timeline. It shouldn't take too long. This issue is just
So too
brought up
long
to
for
us
me is like
Tuesday.
24 hours.
It'll probably take a little bit longer
Okay.
than that, but we'll
By the end
respond for the record.
By the end of the year,
We'll provide that for the record, sir.
I'll be waiting on it. You know, and I tell you guys and gals all the time, you work in the VA, it's the hardest job there is, but it is our responsibility to hold you accountable. So I'm going to need those timeframes so I can pass that on to this young lady and we can disseminate out to our veterans. Okay?
Absolutely, sir.
Admiral, tracking everything that you're saying. Currently, who is for lack of a better term, who is the touch point? So General Bredenkamp is over the top, but there's got to be a touch point that you're dealing with or engaging with directly to somebody's got to run point on this. And the general's, he's got a large area of operation, right? But somebody that's specifically focused on the horses, do we have that individual, that young lady or that young man?
Mr. Chairman, I tend to deal with General Bredenkamp and his deputy a lot, and also with the commander of the provisional Caisson detachment right now, so Lieutenant Colonel Quintana. So he, as the military, commander of the unit right now, is who we interact with the most. They are trying to establish some civilian government service individuals to have be a program manager. I would maintain that they should have some long-term military officers in the unit structure.
Correct. So from my understanding, that doesn't that's currently not happening and contracted
Right. They currently aren't doing it, so they're relying on contract support for most everything, which is necessary for now. But the key is if you don't get a more permanent long-term unit structure in place, the longer you wait on that, the longer you're going to have to rely on contracted and other
Gotcha.
civilians.
Okay, so it's our job to figure out when that transition is going to happen. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Pappas, I yield to you, sir, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Buck, thanks very much for making the trip down from New Hampshire. We appreciate your comments. And you mentioned the Burial Equity for Guards and Reserves Act and gave us a status update on how many burials you've seen under that act. I'm wondering if you have any feedback from your colleagues across the country in terms of other states that have interred members of the Guard and Reserve who might not meet that strict definition of veteran, but who deserve the honor no less.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the question. 20 states currently bury members of the Guard and Reserves. Each one has a little bit different rules and regulations for how they run the program. And 5 tribal cemeteries bury members of the Guard and Reserves. I will say that probably the biggest challenge is we have to set up our own supply chain to order the headstones and the niche markers to match what is currently in our veteran cemetery. So for us, we just went to the exact same vendor that is used by the VA, and we set up an individual supply chain for the state of New Hampshire, and we order those headstones, and that's all. The headstones and the markers are all paid for by the state of New Hampshire.
We appreciate your leadership in helping us get that bill through. I think it's an important step forward. Now, regarding the Veteran Cemetery Grant Program, can you tell us a little bit about your interactions with the National Cemetery Administration in accessing those grants? Are they responsive and helpful? Would you say those experiences are typical among your peers? Have you heard of any problems?
Honestly, I can say no, that we haven't heard of significant problems. They reach out early. So as we start to approach 4 years of space left for any type of burial, that's a little before that you submit and saying, hey, we're going to need a new expansion. And they reach out to us and they'll assign a project manager to us that shepherds us through the process. They do, frankly, a tremendous job. And I, from my experience, no veteran cemeteries had issues, but that doesn't mean it doesn't. I'm not certainly aware of all the expansions that are done in other veteran cemeteries, but in mine, it's been very straightforward and clear. And frankly, some of the issues I've had have been on my end. You know, sometimes I'm not able to get all my ducks in a row, and there's a lot that happens that I have to do internally from the state of New Hampshire. But it hasn't shown itself to be an issue, and they're always super helpful. I pick up the phone or email them, they respond right away. So I have nothing but praise for the Veteran Cemetery Grants Program.
And has the grant level proven adequate to be able to meet your needs in terms of maintenance and expansion?
Absolutely. The level meets our needs for burials. Their goal is to do a 10-year expansion so that they're not coming back all the time, so that we should be good for 10 years. Again, based on current burial rates. You never know when that's going to change. And then all the additional things that go with the watering stations, the gardens, all the things that go with making that beautiful. We did not shortcut anything, nor do we add anything additional. I think it's an efficient program.
You mentioned in your testimony concern about honor guards and not always having 2 individuals there from the services to make sure that the funeral is able to proceed in the fashion that you would hope. I'm wondering if that's a regional concern or if you're hearing that from colleagues across the country.
Good question. I did call down to a national cemetery because I wanted to see if it was similar to them. And I think it is similar because it's handled differently by branch. Just real briefly, in New Hampshire, the National Guard takes care of the Army and the Air. The reserves take care of the Navy. So they reservists from around the state get as they're available, but it's not their duty. It's if their civilian job if they have time, and so it's a coordination effort with them. The Marine Corps handles centrally out of Quantico, and they usually send active duty Marines that are assigned to a reserve detachment in New Hampshire. And the Coast Guard sends up active duty Coast Guardsmen from the closest base. Usually for us, it's in Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Ms. Witter, you mentioned concerns about just the ease of finding information about funeral options, and we heard from Mr. Chandler a little bit more about efforts to improve the website about whether cemeteries are actually open for burial or not. But with that number that you mentioned, 11.6% finding it easy, it seems like that issue would go beyond just that specific issue about whether cemeteries are open or not. Can you describe any other challenges that people might encounter along the way in terms of finding the information that they need?
Thank you. I've actually talked to the VA about this because we work a great deal with the VA to educate funeral service. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we had a convention where all the branches of the military, DOD, the VA, everybody got together and they came and they met with like 6,000 of our members. They have a huge military presence every time we have a convention. We have classes, we have webinars, we do a lot to educate funeral service, so we're good there. But even funeral directors, when they go on the website, which NFDA links directly to Military OneSource, so it's the most up-to-date information. Even when our members go there, they struggle with it. It's not them I'm worried about, it's actually the family members. And I think what happens is, if you use a case of like, somebody signs up, they join the military when they're 18, by the time they're 60, do you think they really remember a conversation they had about what benefits they're entitled to? So what we found is a lot of the military members and their families actually believe that they're entitled to all these funeral and burial benefits that they're not entitled to. They think everything's 100% paid. I have several quotes from people on our survey. Many veterans believe that their funeral will be 100% covered because they're a vet. The problem with that is, it's not the VA sitting there telling a grieving family, oh, sorry, you gotta pay a bill. So for years, the veteran has believed one thing, and then at that time of need, when the family's grieving, that's when they're told that the VA is not covering those benefits. That falls on the funeral director. So what we recommend is that early in the process, beforehand, when the family's not grieving and struggling to deal with that, that's when they should know about the benefit. So I think we need to start targeting to an earlier point. And I understand why the first thing you see on the VA websites about benefits is not about death benefits. I get that's not something people want to see first up, but it's a reality, so we need to find a way of better educating families.
Thanks for that feedback. I yield back.
Thanks, sir. Mr. McGarvey, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all very much for being here today, sharing your testimony with us. Mr. Walters, I am really inspired to hear the many examples of how your administration has prioritized increasing veteran trust and investing in innovation. Pilots like the Green Burial Initiative in Colorado, California, and Florida, programs like the Veterans Legacy Memorial Interactive Biographical Database. I think these are great examples of an innovative response approach to honoring our fallen veterans. I'm a big believer in innovation in the VA. We'll talk more about this as this Congress continues, the next Congress goes, but I love what you guys are doing. Additionally, I think you guys working to streamline eligibility determinations and scheduling burials through the transition to the Memorial Benefits Management System, it shows an investment in building stronger trust among veterans and their families. So I want to thank you for that. There's a cemetery that's back in my district, Greenwood Cemetery, a great place that had gone forgotten for far too long, in some senses for some of the wrong reasons as well. And some of the organizations that are supporting these, like Friends of Greenwood Cemetery, they're run by nonprofits. They're volunteers without grant funding from NCA or its partners. So my question is, for some of our local cemeteries like this back in our districts, or for some of the supporting organizations, how can you receive support from NCA and its partners? And for any of those groups watching, what would you tell them about how NCA can help and who they can talk to?
Thank you for the question, sir. At this time, we do not have the authority to provide grants or other types of funding for cemeteries that have not been established through the grant program. We do have restoration efforts that we sponsor at various cemeteries throughout the country, particularly those in underserved communities, where we have experts from NCA that take their time to go to these locations and provide advice and recommendations for how best to bring the cemetery up to standard or to help out. So I think the best thing to do at this point for those types of cemeteries would be to contact us at NCA, and we'll get them on the schedule for these types of efforts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because when we think about our veterans, honoring the men and women who served us, it's so important that they all rest in dignity and power. For someplace like Greenwood Cemetery in particular, I think it's just worth noting it's for our Black veterans, and for far too long, places like that have been overlooked. And when you think about the fact that Black veterans have fought in every single American conflict, including the 9,000 who fought in the Revolutionary War, the 1 million veterans who fought in World War II, who gave their lives in many instances for the ideal and ideas of America we didn't always live up to, as was written, fighting Hitler abroad and fighting Jim Crow at home. I think they can use a little help, and it'd be great for us to provide that. Thank you.
Sir, if you could provide a contact information for that cemetery, we'd be happy to reach out.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Landsman, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone. Very quick, very parochial question. I'm from Cincinnati and represent Southwest Ohio. I know you all try to ensure that veterans are buried within 75 miles. And for us, that means Dayton or across the river in Kentucky. We love Dayton, and we do love Kentucky too. But I was hoping you could speak to, one, what, if anything, is in the works in terms of our region, Cincinnati. I mean, it's a big region. And two, we have a huge VA and a huge veteran population. And then what advice you'd have for my families who ask, why is it that we're, having to go all the way up to Dayton or across the river?
Thank you for the question, sir. The 75-mile criterion is a national strategy, and it is one that has been in effect for many years. Unfortunately, there are instances in which either geography or other impediments will make it more difficult for certain veterans and families to access cemeteries. At this point, we are focused on completing the 18 national cemeteries that we currently have in development as part of that 75-mile strategy, and then we'll work from there to see if there's an amendment to the policy that's needed. Off the top of my head, I don't recall if there's grant-funded cemeteries in that area, which are also an opportunity for veterans to take advantage of burial benefit.
Yeah, so maybe we could work together, or you could, somebody could circle back with my team or me on Cincinnati in Southwest Ohio, and what I should be advocating. This is really me asking you what's in the works, if anything, and if not, what should I be pushing for as a way of ensuring that folks don't have to drive so far?
Understood. Of course, we'd be willing to work with you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sure. Oh, sorry.
Sir, I just figured, is it all right if so in New Hampshire, it was done at the local level. A lot of state and local legislators worked hard and found the land. And once they found the land, they said, we're going to put a state veteran cemetery, and the state's going to donate this land to becoming a veteran cemetery. Then they work with the federal government to get that portion built into a state veteran cemetery. So just a little bit of history. It took a few years of the local folks back in the mid-'90s. Started in the early 90s. Real legislation started in the mid-'90s, and in '97 is when our cemetery opened. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate it. I yelled back. I apologize.
Thanks, sir. All good. So are you good to go? Second round? Okay. Thank you all to our witnesses for testifying for us today. As we close, I just ask that the Army and the VA work together. As we've heard, there's certain problems that shouldn't exist, and whether or not it's a communication breakdown, and trust me, I know bodies ebb and flow, things happen. Case in point with the Caisson platoon admiral, that it just you could, if you kind of roll the tape back, you could see the problem manifesting itself, but here we are, and there it is. Okay, that's something that shouldn't happen. And with these two amazing organizations, let's fix the issues. So, Admiral, I'd ask that you and I get back together here, and I'll have my staff reach out to you. Mr. Walters, can I see you in the antechamber back here? Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for the information. And I will hand it off to the ranking member for his closing remarks.
No, just grateful for this panel and for our first witness, the general who testified. And I think that this is an area that requires some further attention from this subcommittee. It's under our purview, and I'm just really grateful for the feedback that we received from so many different angles of this issue in terms of how we honor our veterans, give them a final resting place, and support our veterans and military families. So thank you for that commitment, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to continuing to work together on it. I yield back.
Yes, sir. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. Hearing is adjourned.